Good evening and welcome to week 3 of our Lenten mission. Each week the theme is set by a question. This week the question is, why a God? And it's a particularly cutting question for us in this particular time in the history of the world. We just closed off 20 years ago the 20th century, the bloodiest century in the history of the world. Incredible. Just in World War II alone, over 70 million people were killed. The war was started by Hitler, an atheist. All of the problems of our world are caused by us, by people. And yet we sometimes think, well, if there's a God, why does this happen? So today's session is going to explore that notion of man's search for God, our search for God, and how that has crossed through all the centuries, different areas of our world, in Asia, in what we call the Americas now, in Europe, in Africa, in the subcontinent of India. In all those places, people were seeking God. And today, we still seek Him. Even though some have grown more and more secular, the voice of God is everywhere. And not only do we seek Him, He seeks us. And so today, we are going to explore that notion of why a God? Why a God who loves us?
We are all looking for something. The story of human history has largely been a story of faith. We need our relationship with our Maker, our relationship with life, to make sense. Where does this all come from? What on earth am I here for? Where am I going? What happens when I die? We want answers to our fundamental questions about the meaning of life. Throughout history and all around the world, we human beings have sought to make sense of all of this. You go to the most distant, untouched jungles and you will find that people are ritualizing things to give expression to what they believe. You can go to Israel, and the center of worship for the Jews for centuries was their temple. And in the center of that temple was an altar. Or you can go to any Catholic church in the world and see an altar. You can go to Greece and Rome, and they had altars where they offered sacrifice to their gods. You go all the way to the other side of the planet in Hawaii, you find what's called a heiau, that's the Hawaiian word for temple, and you find ahus, that's the Hawaiian word for altar. There's altars in these different cultures that never had any physical contact with each other at all. And not only did they give outward expression to the things they believed, they did it in the same way. They sought, where did all this come from, and how do I honor the source of all this by offering something in return? There's something we need about this whole exchange with the divine to give us a sense of purpose and meaning. About the idea that we're not a cosmic accident. This world makes sense. There is an unseen reality interacting with us and guiding us through life. There's an end purpose to all this. But the big question is, but is this all true? Is this whole religion thing just kind of a big waste of time? I mean, is there even a God? Despite the fact that human beings have been religious throughout history, there's this growing notion today that God's no longer necessary. In fact, faith is a little bit silly, a thing of the past.
One of the deepest questions we can be asked, or we can ask ourselves, is it reasonable to believe in God?
There was a famous atheist Russian cosmonaut who got into outer space and he looked around and he said, there's no God anywhere. You know, modern atheists mock our idea of God as saying, yeah, whatever, I believe in a flying spaghetti monster. No self-respecting Christian believes that God is this mythological creature flying around in space. That's just not what we mean when we say the word God.
I think that sometimes people reject God because they have a false understanding of who God is. Even religious people, in the back of their mind somewhere, they think of God as this old man in the sky, like that guy in the pink bedsheet on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. Or on the other extreme, people kind of have this idea of God as a nebulous force, but isn't really personal or specific. So then, who is this God that we're looking for?
We don't think that God's this mythological creature flying around in space. You see, we believe that God is existence itself, that space and time are flying around in Him.
The fact that anything exists causes us to accept and embrace a mystery at the heart of reality. The fact that all of human experience suggests that it is reasonable to believe in God. And indeed, those who came long before Christianity, such as the Greek philosophers, came to an understanding just through the use of reason alone that God must exist.
Throughout all of history, people have looked outside of themselves to find the answers to their fundamental questions.
And of course, for Christians, it's only natural that the cosmos that's made by that God should, if you like, be smudged with his fingerprints.
Yeah, I think we're the first era in history to have so many people say, God, if you're really there, why don't you reveal yourself to us? I think God is looking down from heaven saying, did you not notice everything? As St. Augustine said, question the beauty of the earth. Question the beauty of the sea. Question the beauty of the air. Question the beauty of the sky. Question the serried ranks of the stars. Question the sun, making the day glorious with its bright beams. Question the moon, tempering the darkness of the following night with its shining rays. Question the animals that move in the waters, that amble about on dry land, that fly in the air, their souls hidden, their bodies evident. Question all these things. They all answer you. Here we are. Look, we're beautiful. Their beauty is their confession. Who made these beautiful, changeable things, if not one who is beautiful and unchangeable? Creation shouts to us about the existence of God. And not just the existence of this force that's removed from us, but a God who's beautiful and who loves us. You know, if you go to a museum and stare at a painting, get lost in it, you don't just see the painting. You get an insight into the heart of the painter. I think most of us want to believe in God. We want there to be more to life. We want there to be a meaning to it all. We want there to be an afterlife. You know, we have this built into us, and we want answers to those fundamental questions, but more and more people are holding back from that hope. They stop asking those questions because, you know, maybe they think faith is foolish. People tend to view Christians today, more and more, as an anti-science, anti-intellectual group of people. What a myth that is. Welcome to the middle of nowhere. Here in the remote and beautiful mountains of the Arizona desert, you'll find something unexpected. A modern observatory, fully equipped to explore the universe, run and owned by none other than the Roman Catholic Church.
So the Vatican has its own astronomical observatory up on Mount Graham. This seems to surprise a lot of people. Often when people come to visit, the first thing they ask is, why on earth does the Vatican have an observatory? My somewhat mischievous reply is that it's because we can't afford a particle accelerator. So the Vatican Observatory was founded in the 1580s by Pope Gregory XIII in the context of his reform of the calendar. The old Julian calendar was messing up. It didn't have the length of the year right. It was in the Tower of the Winds in Vatican City. It also had telescopes at the Campidoglio in Rome. And it also had telescopes at the Jesuits' Roman College. There were 4 telescope domes on the walls of Vatican City. The entire Vatican was basically an astronomical observatory. The Vatican Observatory moved to Castel Gandolfo in 1935, and right away, 2 telescopes were installed on top of the Pope's summer vacation home. These telescopes were the cutting edge of 1935 technology. The Jesuits of the Vatican Observatory have been side by side with the popes, sharing views through the telescope. But by the 1970s, 1980s, the lights of Rome were encroaching to the point where it was difficult to do successful observations for research purposes from that location.
So we were chased out of Rome by light pollution. Tucson, Arizona is one of the major centers for astronomy, and it is really a place where quite a lot of things happen when it comes to the development of astronomical instrumentation. So it is a good place to be.
The Vatican Observatory came to have its own telescope at Tucson, and it's up on Mount Graham. The reason for being of the observatory is the mere fact of having competent, hardworking, regular scientists who happen also to be priests and brothers living in community and doing science on behalf of the church. It is the church's participative calling card in the world of astronomy. Some of them focus on galaxies and the evolution of galaxies. Some focus on stars, the life cycle of stars. Some focus on planets of our solar system or exoplanets. Some focus on near-Earth objects and asteroids. Quite apart from there being any sort of conflict of science and faith, the long-standing complementarity, love, collaboration between the church and science. Remember, if you're doing science, you're doing it for real, you are looking for the truth. And the church is all about the truth.
If faith were anti-science, someone should tell George Lemaitre, who came up with what's now called the Big Bang Theory, or Roger Bacon, who's the grandfather of the scientific method. They were both Catholic priests. If faith is anti-science and anti-reason, someone desperately needs to tell Nicholas Copernicus, pioneer of heliocentrism, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who prefigured the theory of evolution with Lamarckism, with Friar Gregor Mendel, the pioneer of genetics, or Father Angelo Secchi, father of stellar spectroscopy. All those people were priests and religious. There are even 35 Jesuits on the moon, 35 lunar features named after priests because they discovered them. The church is hardly opposed to science.
Science can sometimes appear like it's just a mere body of information. What I think is really beautiful about science, though, is that it's more interactive. It's a tool that we can use to investigate and understand the world around us.
They're separate things. They're answering separate questions. Why am I here? Why do I exist? Why is the universe here? Those sort of questions, science doesn't necessarily attack. Science can tell us the how of things, how the universe works, but it can't address certain questions like the why of the universe. Why was it created? Why are we here?
Faith isn't anti-science. Faith gave birth to the sciences because it gave people a worldview that said, this world we find ourselves in inherently makes sense. It has order to it. And why? Because it was birthed from an ordered mathematical mind that makes sense. So let's dive in and dissect it.
The questions that really make me excited within astronomy is thinking about our own origins. My name is Karin Oberg. I am a professor of astronomy at Harvard University. I am also an adult convert to Catholicism. So what I do here at Harvard is that I'm combining my expertise in chemistry and in astronomy to try to figure out how our solar system formed, how our Earth became the habitable, the living planet it is, and then how other planets form and the likelihood of finding other living planets out there. I actually find modern cosmology is probably telling us something about the personality of the Creator. I mean, this seems to be a God who wants the universe to participate in creating, where we see how the universe changes over time and new structures, often unexpected structures appears, but still in accordance with the laws of nature. I think that the word exists at all points to that there is a creator who created the word. I think the beauty of the cosmos points towards a creator that is beautiful and that values beauty. The intelligibility of the word points to an intelligent creator.
You know, you can't even do science unless you start with the presupposition, with the faith, if you will, that the world itself is stable and reasonable and orderly. Science can't prove that the world is going to be the way tomorrow that it is today. Science can't prove that we can make sense of reality. Science has to presuppose that. In the Christian view, at least, the ground of the order and intelligibility of the world is God. So that's the answer to the limit question, if you will. Why is there something rather than nothing? And why is that something orderly rather than chaotic? Science does a great job of unpacking and exploring that order. But science can't explain why science can do that.
You know, the more we learn about the universe, the more it shouts to us about the existence of God. If you see a bunch of dominoes tumbling over, you know it had to start somewhere. You know, our belief in God starts at the beginning.
But let me take you back. Let's go back before the start of recorded history. Let's go even further back, 4.6 billion years ago, to when the sun was created. Actually, let's go even further back. Okay, keep going, 13.7 billion years. And that brings us here, where there's nothing. I don't just mean no stars. I mean no time, no space, nothing.
Everything is an effect of some cause. As a matter of fact, the whole of the universe is simply a series of cause and effect relationships. Our parents are the cause of ourselves, for example. But that's true in everything in material experience. But we ought to know that the universe itself is a giant effect. It is itself something which has been caused. What cause would be sufficient to cause all other causes and effects? That cause, which is superior to all causes, and so also all effects, is what we call God.
Question that often comes up is, which is true, the Big Bang or biblical creation?
You have one origin story in the Bible. It's actually spelled out very clearly, like Genesis seems to have a very clear story to it. And then you have a separate origin story using the scientific method that is telling us that things happen gradually over incredible long periods of time. So you seem to have two accounts. They're saying different things. They can't both be true, can they?
For me, it's not an either or. The Big Bang is a scientific theory which tells a causal story about how the universe moved from an earlier state to a later state. That's what science does. That's not what Christian creation is trying to do. The Christian creation story is about how reality itself came to be, how the causal laws came to be.
What is very important then is to look at Genesis and try to understand what is the main point of Genesis and what is used in the cosmology of the time. What is special is how that cosmology is interpreted, and especially how everything comes from one God, is a loving act of creation that is happening in an orderly way, in an intelligible way, and how humans are created in a special way within that order.
I think we want to make sure we approach the Bible, or really any piece of literature, by asking, what did the author intend to communicate? Not approaching the scriptures like a fundamentalist, just reading it at face value, reading it in a very wooden way, but really thinking through, what is the author trying to communicate, understanding its original historical context, understanding the literary genres and the modes of expression that are being used. That's just good reading of any kind of literature. We need to look at the Bible the same way.
The creation story is about why there's something rather than nothing, and about why this something that exists has the kind of order which makes science possible. Once that all exists, scientists can investigate away and come up with a Big Bang theory. Amen. That's searching for the truth, and that's searching for God. That's pointing to God. But it's different from the biblical story of creation, which is pointing to God who creates something out of nothing and who gives order to that something.
When I read Genesis, I have that now modern cosmology in the back of my mind. I see harmony, and I think that the way I read Genesis has become more beautiful the more I learn about our cosmology, our origins, and not less so.
Faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. And God has placed in the human heart a desire to know the truth. In a word, to know himself. Pope John Paul II said that. No, it's not science against religion. It's this very weak philosophy called scientism against religion. This idea that you can only arrive at truth by studying things using the scientific method, and whatever fits into that little tiny category is true, and the rest, you can't really know. So you can't know anything about friendship, about love, about the fact that a sunset is beautiful. Those things can't be verified using the scientific method. You can't know anything about a poem or about literature being good or bad. No. Faith opens up your heart and mind to the full big picture of reality. That's where faith comes in.
Strictly speaking, what we call faith is something that all human beings exercise. We have to have faith just to interact with other human beings. We have to have trust in the actions of others. If we're studying science, we need to have faith that the scientists have run the experiments that are being described in the textbook, right, which demonstrate certain scientific truths, right? It requires faith in the conduct of other human beings. St. Augustine actually says that you can't live a human life without faith of this natural kind. So it's not as though that faith is peculiar to Christians. All human beings exercise a kind of faith, belief in other human beings, belief that certain things they're taught are true. But faith in the religious sense, in the Christian sense, really has to do with a real form of knowing which extends to things which are beyond the normal mode of knowing. So things that can be learned through sense experience. And faith is really this capacity to recognize the truth of things that we couldn't know naturally through the normal human means.
It's not that what we believe in is unreasonable. It's that what we believe in is something that is beyond our ability to reason. You can't fully fit it in your head. It's like trying to bite a wall.
And that's what we actually call faith in the religious or spiritual sense. It's a spiritual capacity to say yes to something which the intellect cannot directly see on its own. Not because it's not true, but because it can't be sensed, it can't be acquired or come to be known through the normal mode of sense experience.
The problem
for most of us isn't a complete lack of faith in God, a complete rejection of the idea that there's anything beyond the created world. Most of us do have an intuition that there's something more to life, there's something more than just what I can see and touch and hear and feel and all those things. But the problem is that we tend to be a little bit lazy. We tend not to really want to think about who God is and really pursue him. Maybe we think it doesn't matter. Maybe we think God is just sort of a nebulous force and he's happy as long as we're happy. Or maybe we think of God as a kind of therapist who's just there when I need his help, and then otherwise he's just doing his own thing in heaven. If God is really out there, if God is really personal in some sense, and he's trying to communicate with us, trying to talk to us, and also if God is who he says he is, infinite, eternal, and all of those things, then God really is worth getting to know. So then, who is this God that we're looking for? If we've rejected the notion that God is just an old dude in the sky, that he's some kind of magical person floating up in the clouds, if we reject that idea, we're confronted with the true God. And the true God is not a human being times a million. The divine nature is not human nature just amplified. The true God is all-powerful, which isn't really powerful. The true God is all-knowing. That doesn't just mean knowing lots and lots and lots. And this God is worth searching for. This God is worth knowing. This God can be a little terrifying. It's a little scary to start pursuing someone who isn't old, who doesn't even exist in time, who isn't big because he transcends space and created space. That's the kind of God that we're searching for. That's the kind of God that we want to know more about, because that's actually a confrontation with the meaning of life and the meaning of who we are and the meaning of the universe.
So faith is a choice. It's a reasonable choice. But let me go a step further here. If you want a meaningful life, if you want joy and peace and happiness and a sense of purpose, it's also a necessary choice. I mean, a lot of people think that religion is totally irrelevant, that we don't even need to ask these fundamental questions about the meaning of life or about God to live with any sense of purpose or peace or happiness. Think about this. I mean, if there's nothing outside of us that created us, or nothing toward which we are ordered as human beings, then when it comes to questions of good or bad, or right or wrong, or evil, just a matter of opinions. Let's go a step further. Can we even talk about good and evil, right or wrong, if there's no maker? What is goodness? What is moral goodness if there's no maker? You know, something is good for something else if it helps it fulfill its purpose. Gasoline is good for your car because your car has a created purpose. The only reason there is good and bad at the end of the day is because we have a created purpose, because we have a creator. So listen, if you don't have faith, I want to leave you with this challenge. Ask God to show you. Ask him to show you if he exists or not. If you have just a little tiny flicker of faith but want a lot more, ask him to give you more. You have absolutely nothing to lose, and potentially everything to gain. So all our searching as a human race ultimately leads us back to our source, to the big God question. Look, if you want real meaning, real purpose, a firm sense of happiness, your faith, you can't just see it as something reasonable. It's essential. Because only that fundamental belief that your existence in the cosmos is not the result of a cosmic accident, only that belief that you're more than a random collection of molecules destined for nothingness, only that belief that there's something more waiting for you after your death, only that can give you a sense of purpose that you need to have the happiness that you've always been looking for. You know, a lot of people don't even get to the table where they're coming together and asking these questions, because we've gotten so dang good at living constantly distracted lives. We're so good at forgetting our fundamental longing today. The search at the end of the day is the search for meaning, for happiness, the search for God. Because if there's no God, life's a cosmic accident, that's it. If there's no author, there's no story. You're part of a big show about nothing. We're made by God and for God. We're supposed to look for him to be the fulfillment of the deepest longings in our souls. But what if that God that you've always really been looking for, even if you've not named him, that God that the human race has always been looking for, through all our religious beliefs and practices throughout history, what if that God, what if he came looking for you?
So we invite you, if you would like, if you have some observation, a thought you'd like to share that on Facebook. If you have a question, try to answer it. But feel free to use the comments section on Facebook so that we can interact a little bit. If you don't want to, you don't have to. One thought, the word cosmology came often in this session, and cosmology simply means it's the study of the cosmos, the universe, from the point of view of finding its origins. So that's that word that was used so often tonight is simply the study of where did the universe come from. So that might be helpful in your reflections. I would also suggest that in this incredibly beautiful film that we just watched, we saw images of some incredibly powerful moments. So looking at the sky, we don't see the sky very much here in Brooklyn. The stars, there's all the light pollution that he referred to in Rome that made them move their Arizona. So we don't see too many stars here. But when you're outside of the city and you look up and you see just an enormous number of stars and you can see the Milky Way, ask yourself, where did it come from? How did it get there? Was there a God that created it? Or was it an accident? Those are the types of questions that can help us to understand our faith a little better, to understand that everything can't be measured. If you've ever loved another person, you know that there is no measuring it. Some people say, oh, I love you from here to the moon. Well, that's a long way. But it's not really a measure, because love can't be measured. Science can't do that. And yet we know that love exists, just as beauty does. If there are no reflections or questions, it might be helpful for us to go back just a little bit and to think about how it's not just our search for God, but God's search for us. Think about this as followers of Christ, as followers in the Jewish tradition of the Old Testament. God sent prophets to help the people to come back to him. He kept reaching out to the people of Israel so that they would know that he cared, that he loved. He called them. They are the chosen people. And so he continues to reach out to us, to search for us. So he sends his only Son, Jesus Christ, to search for us. So just as we search for him, he searches for us. And our prayer tonight is that in that two-way search, that we will find what we're looking for and allow God to find us, to touch our hearts, so that we can truly be a people of love for one another. God bless you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.